Assalamualaikum. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm really happy to have you all here today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. My name is Sumaya Kulabi, and I'll be your host for today's session. I'm a psychology graduate practicing acceptance and commitment therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm currently based in Ankara, Turkey. And as a neuropsychologist, supporting our community's healing journey is something I care about deeply. For that reason, I'm truly honored to be here with you, all of you, and especially to be joined by our guest, Heidi Coke. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and hope it brings clarity and understanding. Today, we'll be talking about a topic that matters to many of us understanding trauma symptoms with EMDR therapy. So, without further ado, I'd love to invite Heidi to introduce herself and share about her background and experience. Heidi, the floor is yours.
Great. Oh, good morning for me. Good evening for you.
Thank you.
Yes, as Sumaya said, I'm Heidi Pitcoke, and I've been a therapist for 30 years this year. Um, and I've had like a life that has been allowed me to live and to work in lots and lots of different places in the world. I was born in Brazil and moved to the States when I was 11. I got my master's here in San Francisco, where I'm currently living, in 1995 in somatic psychology. And I've studied lots of different modalities like voice movement therapy, core energetics, and I'm also trained in EMDR. And I've worked in South Africa. I worked and lived in Kenya. I've worked in Geneva, consulting with a UN agency, a very small one. So I've done lots of different things, and I've been involved with the Uyghur Wellness Initiative, I think, since 2021, maybe. So it's been something that I've been very, very privileged to be a part of for some years.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Heidi. We're really grateful to have you with us today.
Thank
Uh,
you.
to begin, as you know, the Uyghur community carry layers of trauma, both individual and collectives.
Yeah.
From a clinical perspective, could you explain what trauma is
Yeah.
and how it commonly presents itself emotionally, physically, or in daily functioning?
Okay.
And considering context like ours, what would you recommend for someone who's beginning EMDR therapy?
Okay. So I have a couple of slides I want to go through to kind of help with this. So
Mhm.
if we could look at that next slide. Great. So if you guys look at this slide, there are lots of different causes of trauma, and this is a slide that kind of helps us understand the different ways that a traumatizing event can occur. So it can occur through direct violence, so like through human trafficking, political violence and war, through criminal violence, accidents, sexual abuse, all of those, domestic violence, like that's direct violence that is impacting us. And then there's natural violence, which feels a little bit impersonal, but a lot of us are subjected to more and more these days. Flooding, hurricanes, tsunamis, you name it. We know about the droughts and the earthquakes. And then structural violence, which is poverty, disability, hunger, unemployment. So because we are being impacted by like having to survive in a situation where we don't have enough to provide for our basic needs, or that the society that we're in doesn't respond to us as a human being, right? And then there's the cultural violence. And cultural violence, I would say, is a big piece of what shows up for the Uyghur population, right? Is in,
Mhm.
intense discrimination, racism, like living in a state of apartheid, the political aggression, um, and, and the objectification of a people, and the destruction, right, of like the really important cultural objects or like historical sites or religious sites. And so, with when there is cultural violence, there is this pervasive sense that the power that is at hand is hugely oppressing you just because of who you are, right? Nothing to do with that. So
Mhm.
I would say that's a really important way to distinguish, because complex trauma can happen when we have lots of these kind of traumatizing events happening, like, either simultaneously or sequentially, which often happens in people's lives, right? Can we have the next slide? But I would say the heart of how trauma like is experienced is an experience of betrayal, or by being othered, right? And so the betrayal of a country's, because when we think of the authority of a country, we think like the country is meant to support our basic human life functioning. And so if the country is doing the opposite of that, there is this inherent sense of betrayal, because, like, I've never been there, but I can imagine the stories that I hear of the onslaught of being othered, right, in your homeland, is intense and unrelenting, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit what you asked in terms of what trauma is. So can we have the next slide? The other piece before we talk about the specific trauma is it's important to know that trauma can be inherited, right? And so in populations like the Uyghur community, like the Palestinian community, where the institutionalized violence, the structural violence, is present for decades, right? Then that can impact how somebody responds who has never maybe like been exposed to a traumatizing event directly. So there's a psychological and a physical impact. And the studies that were done with this were one of the studies that was done was looking at the telomere, so like, which is indicative of whether, like, the length of a telomere is indicative to how well we can respond to stress because of how much cortisol is in our systems. And the grandchildren of people who were imprisoned in World War II in the Nazi concentration camps. So that the grandchildren who were born in the States, never had this structural violence, had more cortisol in the system, therefore they could respond to stressful situations with less capacity than the control group, which was people who weren't, who didn't have that historical trauma. And so,
Mhm.
so a lot of that multi-generational transmission of trauma and illness can show up in populations where the trauma is, or the traumatizing events are unrelenting. So that's also important to know. But let's talk a little bit about how trauma like shows up. So can I have the next slide? So most people recover from a traumatizing event like a car accident because we have built-in resilience, right?
Yeah.
So some research has shown that close to 25% of people may develop PTSD after undergoing a traumatic incident. So that's like a once-off incident, right?
Mhm.
Uh, like the death of a loved one, having a broken bone when you're a child, something like that. But human-caused trauma shows much higher levels of PTSD because it matters to us if it feels directed at us. So victims of rape have much higher levels of PTSD than victims of accidents, right? So like if an
Mhm.
accident, so if somebody wants to harm us, then like it wounds us at a deeper level of our spirits. Can I have the next slide? Um, so when we're looking at trauma, I want to use this scale, which is called the subjective unit of distress scale, because as we're looking at trauma, sometimes just after a traumatizing event, we can say like, I'm fine, right? There's no pain. Like, like I'm 1 to 3. I like, like, yeah, it bothers me a little bit. And the trauma symptoms can show up much later, like a year later. It can show up 6 months later. It can show up, 3 months later. So sometimes it's immediate and sometimes it's later, but, and it's up to us. It's subjective how much it's impacting us. So everybody who goes through an accident don't all feel the same, right? They're not all going to develop PTSD, but
Mhm.
some people may be feeling it much, much, much more than other people. It really depends on such a huge number of factors. Okay, can I have this next slide? Um, there's ways to look for trauma, like, to see if like what your rate of trauma is. And so this is a Harvard trauma questionnaire. And what's interesting about this questionnaire is the very, very first question that they have is, do you have recurring nightmares? So I would say, like, when we're checking for PTSD, for post-traumatic stress disorder, the very, very first thing that we're looking for is, do you have recurring nightmares? And then, the other things that are on that list, like, do you have a sense of hypervigilance? Do you feel on guard? Do you have trouble sleeping? Do you have, a sense that you get angry easily, or you cry easily? Like, so all of those things are also important. But I would say, when you're assessing for trauma, like, are you suffering from trauma, ongoing trauma symptoms, really think about, is do nightmares happen to you or the people that you know regularly? Can I have the next slide? So our thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings, and our physical sensations, all of this is impacted by trauma. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
like, if you think about, like, what in your studies, what you found out about trauma, like, how would you say it's impacted your thoughts? Like, how would trauma impact thoughts?
Mhm. Probably after having a traumatic event, my thought will be like be be in control, uh, or like take care to everyone and like make sure everyone is okay and make sure there is no danger around you,
Right.
and etc. Something like something warning me like from my like every time, every day, every minute, probably.
Right. And the reason I like this slide, because yes, like, our thoughts are really hugely impacted, but our
Mhm.
thoughts impact our sensations impact our thoughts, right? Our feelings are impacted by our thoughts impact our feelings, etc. Like, it's all a circle that, like, touches in on each other. So let's
Mhm.
let's look into that a little bit more. Can we have the next slide? So, like Samaya is saying, like, so we have thoughts. Our thought is, we like, I don't like this chair. I cannot show my feelings. I deserve better. Those are all thoughts. And the next slide. And so thoughts are different than, like, the mental signs that show up with PTSD, with burnout, with, like, high levels of stress. So that's forgetfulness, poor concentration, poor job performance, having a negative attitude, having, like, a sense of cynicism, feeling bored, like talking negatively to yourself, or feeling paranoid. Like, those, like, are mental signs of stress or burnout or trauma, but they're not necessarily thoughts. Like, the thought in the negative self-talk is, I'm bad, right? So next slide. And then we have our emotions, right? And so the emotions, and a lot of people, a lot of us, like, confuse thoughts and emotions. I feel bad is not actually an emotion, right?
Mhm.
Um, because, like, what is a bad feeling? So I feel guilty, I feel ashamed. Those are emotions. So a lot of the emotional signs that show up in trauma are these: anxiety, frustration, guilt, having, like, a lots of volatility. So, like, sometimes I feel like crying, sometimes I'm really angry, right? um, Having nightmares, like we talked about, feeling a real sense of distance, so feeling apathy, or feeling a sense of depression, like feeling almost nothing. That, next one. And then trauma shows up as physical symptoms, like we're tired a lot, we have a lot of problems with our digestion, we have headaches, we have stomach aches, back pains, disrupted sleep again, appetite changes, so we eat a lot or we don't eat at all, have racing heart, sweaty palms, shallow breathing. All of those are things that could show that you are suffering from trauma. And the next one. And then behavioral changes. So lots of people, and this also includes burnout, have increased alcohol or drug use or tobacco use, a change in eating habits, like I talked about, change in sexual behavior, like really sexually acting out or shutting down sexually, increasing in your risky behavior, like taking risks that you wouldn't normally, like, so it could be sexual, but it also could be like in the way you drive and like, how you drink alcohol. So feeling that kind of manic energy and like, doing a lot and not sleeping very much and like, or being a really avoidant. So again, like we're looking at these things and we're also looking, like this is burnout, this is trauma, this is stress. These are all kind of, it could point to all of those things. And the next one. And these relational signs are really the ones, the warning, like to pay attention to when somebody that you know or love is showing these are warning signs. If you're feeling really isolated, if you're feeling ongoingly resentful or intolerant of others, if you're withdrawing from people and feel or acting in an antisocial way, having lots of marriage problems, feeling lonely all the time, or like complaining and nagging, like that's not okay, you're not doing a good job, right? Like ongoing, like all of those are warning signs. So Maya, do you feel like everybody understands what antisocial behavior is?
Maybe can you like explain a little about one
I
of
was
the
thinking you could explain. What do you think of antisocial behavior?
uh you mean being okay, like you catch me like okay, antisocial behaviors are more like someone who do inappropriate attitudes,
Yeah,
behaviors,
yeah,
and like for example, who steal, who break down somewhere and like do like who fight, like who beat
yeah,
some people or
yeah.
etc. I think.
Yeah, so, like, being aggressive, breaking the,
Mhm,
like, the normal rules of society, right?
mhm,
Being inappropriate in terms of how like, what you say to somebody, or how you touch
mhm.
somebody, right? Like, all of that is antisocial behavior. Exactly.
Yes.
All right, thanks. How about the next slide? All right. And then, trauma also impacts our values, our beliefs, and our spirit. So, like a feeling of emptiness, like really like having doubts in your religious beliefs, feeling a sense of being unforgiven or looking for magical solutions. Like when you lose your sense of purpose or meaning of life, or you need to prove your self worth again and again, or you're feeling cynical. So like when your belief system changes, and that is one of like the enduring parts of trauma is when it shows up in our belief system. And EMDR is so effective in this place, like really, really, like it's effective for all of it, but I am ongoingly amazed, even though I've been trained in EMDR since 2006, right? So almost 20 years, like, like that our belief system shifts. And like, I just ended with a client yesterday and they're like, I am grateful. This is a client where a car smashed them. Like a car fell down on their body and they found the capacity to keep alive. And they're like, I am so grateful for my life. Like love is showing up for me everywhere I look, and so like, and so at the end of trauma, after we resolve trauma, there's something called post-trauma growth. And that,
Mhm.
and that attitude of feeling grateful, of feeling appreciative, of feeling wonder happens after we get to the end of like a really resolving trauma. But we're still talking about trauma. So let's go to the next slide. One of the things I like to talk a lot about when we talk about trauma is that it's this concept of the window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance is when our adult functioning self, like our prefrontal cortex, is online, and we're using, our normal voice, our normal thoughts, and we can respond to stressful environments or situations from that place. When we feel unsafe, we go either up into hyperarousal and we want to fight or flee, or we feel unsafe, we shut down. And that is in much more extreme. It's a different part of our brain that we use when we go into the freeze state, because what we're wanting to do then is just survive by being like, like a little possum, where you just like curl in and say, like, let the world roll over me and I will survive. so Post traumatic stress disorder, people are going up into this hyperarousal, like the fight or flight, or under into the freezing. They're doing this ongoingly, right? And
Mhm.
and the freezing can look like dissociation, where somebody doesn't feel like they're in their body, they're like not behind their eyes. It can be quite extreme. It can be this thing, like one of the ways that my dissociation showed up that I was really interested in is that I would have a very hard time recalling words. Like I would get stuck in word recall. And that is a little bit of how freeze can show up. So it can be very kind of innocuous, right? Like, oh, I
Mhm.
have a hard time getting words out of, or finding the right word. Or it can be really, really extreme, where you're like, somebody like doesn't look like themselves anymore because they're not in their bodies. So,
Mhm.
so that's another really important concept when we're talking about PTSD, is like thinking about staying within our window of tolerance, which can change all the time, right? Hunger makes our window of tolerance smaller, you know, feeling loved and connected makes our window of tolerance bigger. Okay, so I don't know if I answered your question, did I? I don't think I answered all of it.
No, I feel you did. Like it was really clear. I just let me ask later about like EMDR part because I think I asked like something about EMDR.
Okay. So let me go to the next slide, because just talk a little bit more about window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance is interesting because it changes from moment to moment, and it changes between person and person. So like I may have the capacity to deal with a lot of noise,
Mhm.
and another person may not have the capacity to deal with a noisy environment at all. And so your window, or like today I'm calm, and so my window of tolerance for noise, or like lots of people shouting around me might be quite high. And then if I'm tired and I've just had an argument with somebody I love, my window of tolerance could be really little, and I'm like, I can't stand this, I have to cover my ears. So it changes not only from person to person, but over time. So
Mhm.
EMDR, can I have the next slide? EMDR looks a lot at how trauma impacts our beliefs, right? That's why I was talking about beliefs so much, because when we have a traumatizing event and it stays with us, it's because we have these negative, irrational thoughts about ourselves. And so, like looking at these categories, like I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, it's my fault, I should have done more, I can't trust anyone, I can't protect myself. And for people who are in oppressive situations, not all of these thoughts are irrational, right? Because if you're in, like an oppressive state like China, right, where people are paid to like, to spy on you, when you have that thought, I can't trust anyone, it's like for the most part that could be true, right? So that not all of these thoughts are irrational. Um, and, but the one that would be irrational would be like, I am helpless or I'm powerless, because the state wants you to feel helpless and powerless, right? That is
Mhm.
not like that is not irrational. That is what they want. But none of us in our lives are 100% helpless and powerless, right? There is always something that we can do. And so, like reading the stories of like Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned, right? A trained lawyer breaking up rocks day after day, month after month, year after year on Robben Island, like, and what he did with his mind in the face of that, right? Like, none of us is helpless, right? None of us is powerless. And so what EMDR does is we work, with the protocol to help you go from these negative beliefs into a positive belief. And you get to define what you want to believe about yourself, right? That you
Mhm.
want to believe, like, yes, I am good enough, or I'm lovable, or I survived that, or I can choose who to trust, things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Okay.
It's really fascinating how it works. Mm,
It is.
and your words really reflects like the lived realities of our community, like, and I'm sure that many people will feel like seen in what you shared.
Mm.
Like I felt like on my mm, past experience, like just popped up on my mind.
Yeah.
And should I ask my next question?
Yes, definitely.
If is it clear what is trauma? And my main question is what EMDR is
Uh-huh.
and how it work with trauma. And based on your experience with different population,
Okay.
what do people generally notice in terms of effectiveness and the length of the process?
Okay. So can I have the next slide? So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is this huge clunky title. it's not a great title, but it was a therapy that was created here in California, here in Northern California, by a woman who started working with veterans of the Vietnam War. And what she noticed is, over time as she developed it, the woman who developed this, it was a research psychologist named Francine Shapiro. And what she noticed was that processing the trauma, where you were both present in here today and able to access the material from the past, helped to resolve it if there was, very fancy term, bilateral stimulation, which means like you're activating both sides of the brain. And they don't know 100% why this works. They do know that it does work, and it is super effective, right? Like, I've had it done to myself. I've been involved in this, for a long time. It's very effective, but we still don't know 100% why. And there's lots of theories around that. So one theory is that, the limbic system, the emotional part of our brain, which is in the middle part of our brain, is the one that like gets the alarm bells, like, I'm in danger, I'm in danger. And so then the prefrontal cortex goes offline and we can't think, like our vision gets narrow, we get really confused, we get, like hyper alert. And so if we can engage some of that limbic system, but while keeping the prefrontal cortex, like, here I am, I'm in this chair, I'm with this person, right? I'm safe enough. Then we can start to go back and forth and decrease the power of that, like that system that says I'm back in that place where I'm really unsafe. And we do it through these beliefs. We do it through the beliefs and through the memories. And the memories could be like, visual memories, and it can also be body memories, which
Mhm.
is what I like as a somatic therapist. Right? So, and like, it can be memories through smell, right? Like, a lot of our memories can come through smell, and you can work on that with EMDR. So our brain creates these networks of memories linked to these irrational beliefs, right? Like we were talking,
Mhm.
and then you use these techniques and stay in the present, and you disconnect the power of that belief, and you create a new belief. Sorry.
Sorry.
I think I think I'm talking too much.
No, you're not. Your explanation is really important to us. Like, it's really fascinating, by the way. Like,
Yeah. So you know what I thought, Sumaya, was I thought I could teach a little bit of the regulating tools
Mhm.
before we talk about how effective this is. I want to teach, the people who are on the webinar and the people who will see it later, like
Mhm.
like what is going to happen. Okay, so
Yeah.
can I have 2 slides from now? We good. The one with the tree. Yeah, perfect. So let's talk a little bit about regulation tools. So,
Mhm.
so the essential factors that lead to healing. So let's go to the next slide. Are a sense, oh, this isn't great. A sense of acceptance, hope, protection, meaning, reassurance. This slide looks different on mine. Shelter, safety, a sense of agency, which means a sense of having like be able to have power over what you're going to do. Predictability. Um, can I have the next slide? And the other thing that really affects healing, which is, because a lot of what we look at, like, are somebody showing up with trauma symptoms. But the other thing that's really important is like what contributes to your sense of resilience. Sorry.
It's
So looking at this, did you have at least one caregiver? Did you have a good friend? Did you have beliefs that give you comfort? Did you have enjoyment at school? Did you have a teacher that cared for you? Did you have good neighbors? Like all of that contributes to your capacity to withstand and respond to trauma in a
Mhm.
way that you get over it more quickly or more easily. So that's an important piece when we're talking about trauma. The other piece that was really important, can I have the next slide? To protect ourselves from trauma is to have excellent social relationships. And so, like communities that kind of come together, like I imagine a lot, stories that I've heard in terms of what the Uyghurs are doing is that, like in all oppressed populations, they find ways to connect, right? To support each other, to hold on to your religious practices, to hold on to your cultural practices, to hold on to your language, right? Like, I mean, your language is under attack. So that your sense of, I belong to this community and this community matters and this community has beauty and history and like this long standing set of traditions that that contribute to my sense of well-being in myself and life, right? So like having excellent social relationships, right, is really really essential. And so like the concentration camps, like the work camps that the Uyghurs are getting put into, you know is intentional in terms of breaking down some of this. But like the human spirit is very very strong and is going to always find ways to come back into connection when possible. Obviously not everybody is going to be able to survive all of those tactics to get in the way of them feeling like a human being, but when possible, that is one of the best protective factors. Can I have the next slide? So yeah, so the EMDR based tools that I want to talk about are finding resources like a nurturing protective figure, containing and calming, so containing the stuff that really disturbs you, and then the processing with an EMDR therapist. Like I talked about the bilateral stimulation, which can be done with your eyes, your ears, with tapping, and we'll do the butterfly hug before we finish. Can I have the next slide? So the healing from trauma involves lots and lots of different things, right? It involves being safe enough. And one of the hard things when I think about the Uyghur population, when I think about the Palestinian population, when I think about the Sudanese, my God, the Sudanese in Darfur, oh my God. Like like that trauma is so consistent, right? Like everything that is meant to break down the human spirit, the human body, the human mind, like that is so ongoing. And so
Mhm.
how do you heal from that in the face of that ongoing onslaught of aggression and violence? And one of the things that's interesting is that EMDR study was done with children in not in Gaza, in the West Bank. and through the YMCA there, and they saw that just doing what we're going to do later, like finding a safe place and doing some butterfly hugs for the children, helped their resilience get stronger and stronger and stronger so that they could face this, like this onslaught of like, you are less than a person that they were facing, from the institutionalized apartheid. So, it is possible, and
Mhm.
it's not easy. Both are true, right? So can we have the next one? So I want to go through this one. So this one is a lovely, lovely way to help anybody who is having a very hard time with trauma symptoms. So you find a safe, calm place that is either real or imaginary. And if this is difficult to imagine, bring yourself to the present and ask yourself if you're safe enough in this moment. Because some people, who who have gone through traumatizing circumstances can't get their way to safety. They can't, right?
Mhm.
And you can't do any processing of trauma until there is a foundation of at least safe enough, right? So, but many people can, and so if you find a space, like in your mind, in your memory, in your imagination that is safe, and then you just do this back and forth like that. It's called a butterfly hug because it looks like a little butterfly wings. Butterfly. So you guys can do this with me. Okay. Um, so so if you've had a hard time finding a safe place, try to get into the present moment. All right.
Mhm.
Can I have the next slide? So that's the butterfly hug. You can see the butterfly, you can see the butterfly hug. The next one that I want to teach you is a container exercise. So we have a lot of distressing, disturbing thoughts, right? We get scared, we get unsure, we feel insecure, we feel sad, we feel angry. Like, so anything that is distressing you, try to put into a container and put a lid on it. So it can be a much bigger container than this. It can be a much more solid container than this, but you envision putting all of this into the container, putting a lid on it, and then if you need to, put it far away from you. So I tell my clients, put it on the surface of the moon, put it on the bottom of the sea, and having that sense like I can distance myself from all of those disturbing, distressing feelings and thoughts is regulating. And it's really, really important in terms of kind of coming back into that adult functioning that we were talking about.
Mhm.
So, do you want to try that now, or should I just describe it? What do you think?
Oh, I just have a question. What, like, putting in a container, and what is the difference between putting a container and repressing?
Yes, great question. So, with this is a sense of choice. Like I'm putting in the
Mhm.
container when I'm with my therapist, when I'm in a safe enough place, I can open the container, I can choose to take something out or, like feel a little what's in there, and then I can close it, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's not saying that this is bad and I don't and doesn't belong to me. This is
Yeah.
saying I don't want this to be like taking over. It's like what I think of like when a child is crying and crying and crying, right? Like
Mhm.
you're in a crowded space, you want to take that child to a calmer place and soothe it, right? Because
Yeah.
the sometimes crying children can be really distressing, right? Like right? And so like you need to help that child like soothe in a different context. And so
Mhm.
it's like the container is like I am going to attend to you, you do belong to me, but right now you need to be over here. And suppressing, to me, suppressing is like, I don't want to ever look at you. I don't want you to belong to me. Like you don't have a right to exist.
Mhm.
Go away. Right.
Yeah. The
Because
feel
like,
of control.
go ahead.
Yeah, you mean the feel of control is kind of helping.
Yeah. And the feel of choice, but it's also a sense of accepting. Like I accept
Mhm.
that these are my feelings. These are my thoughts. Right. But
Yeah.
for in this moment, I need to put it aside.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me, that those like they feel very different when you do it.
Yes,
So that's
exactly.
I want you to practice, try practicing it and see if it does feel that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And then the next slide. So this is a really wonderful slide to help again create resources, because before you can do EMDR, you have to have a sense that somebody has resources, emotional resources, spiritual resources, physical resources. You can't be in a completely unresourced state. So this is one of the things that we do before we process trauma, is like find somebody in your life or in your imagination who is a spiritual leader or symbol, that you feel like supports you, a protective figure, right? And a nurturing figure. So like those, so like with my clients who believe in angels, like I'll often say like an angel can be a lot of these three things, right? An angel can
Mhm.
be protective, an angel can be a spiritual leader, right? A nurturer, but it can be like a lot of times people use their grandparents, right, as a nurturing person, right? Would you say that was true in your life? It
Yeah,
wasn't true in mine.
maybe.
but
Yeah.
but yeah. So yeah, so those techniques, the butterfly, the safe place, the container, these, like these three healing circle, the spiritual leader, the protective figure, the nurturing figure, like around you in a circle, and you're in the middle of that. Like if you think about yourself with this spiritual person, symbol or protective, and then you do this, like that
Mhm.
will also really regulate and calm your system down.
Mm. Yeah. And it's giving me like um, extra support from like the spiritual guide, probably like because you feel physically, probably. Yeah,
Right.
maybe the
Yeah.
that's really clear and grounding. Like I appreciate how you like bring all the tools to us.
Yeah.
And for the next question, since this webinar is online,
Yeah.
I was wondering how does EMDR work in online setting from your experience? Like
Yeah.
what kind of adjustments do you make for your clients, for your different clients? And are there any advantages or limitations to doing EMDR virtually?
Yeah. It was interesting because, like, in the history of therapy, like there was
Mhm.
such a bias, a huge bias for doing, therapy in person. And so I don't think it was until kind of the mid to late, like 2018, 2016, that I started seeing clients online.
Mhm.
and and I was skeptical at first. I was like, do you think this is going to work? And um, so I was already seeing clients online when the pandemic happened, and
Mhm.
I was really amazed, Sumaya. I was really amazed at how effective EMDR and therapy could be online, right? And
Mhm.
now, post pandemic, like we're like, oh yeah, of course it's pandemic, like it's effective. But I have to say, like I still think person to person, like having a conversation online is different than having a conversation in person. Of course it is.
Yeah.
And it's super effective, right? Because it brings the world together in this wonderful, wonderful way. Um, so like I think person to person, like I am reading what's happening with a client, I think more comprehensively. And
Mhm.
online, I am still reading a lot of what's happening, right? Like I'm still like, oh, that person stopped breathing. I can feel that in my body. Oh, that person is dissociating. I can notice that, right? So EMDR online, yeah, it surprised me that it is actually effective. Um, the thing that you have to change, like, and not everybody who does EMDR has to change this because they have adapted a lot of the things. So like the eye movement, there is a way to have something go back and forth on your screen, so your eye movement can go back and forth. But I tend to go more towards like doing the stimulation with
Mhm.
tapping, like either on your legs or here. I don't do as much of, well, I don't even do the kind of the stuff in your ears. I don't even do that with person to person. So it really depends on the therapist, but
Mhm.
uh, I have to say that, like, yes, I think person to person has more potency, and it's super effective online. Like, and um, the advantages that I have seen for doing therapy online and EMDR online is that people don't have to get activated either going to or from session, right? Like a lot of people don't feel safe in the world. And so getting in a car or like taking the bus or, like getting to your office can be quite dysregulating, right?
Yeah.
So all of that, like doing it in the safety of somebody's home
Mhm.
is like can be much more powerful because like like, oh, here's my pet that I need to comfort myself, or here's my pillow that I need, right? Like all of that is right there, and so sometimes it can have a huge advantage in that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting because still people have a lot of biases like prejudice about like doing online therapy, like doing anything online.
Uh-huh.
Uh, So I also quickly researched about EMDR, like how it work on virtually, and I was impressed. So like some data like show like there's no like differences between doing virtual or in person,
Right.
uh, which I think will help many people feel more
Yes.
confident to trying it.
Right. Right. Yeah, and
And
the
mhm,
Uyghur population, like the Uyghur clients that I have served, I have mostly served online, but I also have served them in person, and like, if they're close enough to me, to my office, I let them choose.
yeah, I see. And that's really interesting because like in our community still there is like a lot of big questions to going any kind of therapy, like
Yeah. Yeah.
and for some people it might be not feel comfortable to
Right.
going somewhere or
Right.
exposing themselves.
Right.
So, you work with a wide range of population across many countries. When
Yeah.
you meet a client from a culture that's unfamiliar to you,
Mhm.
how do you approach building a strong therapeutic relationship, and what kind of challenges have you faced in cross-cultural work?
So I have to tell you a belief that I have. I have a belief from my life and and all the places that I've lived, that I believe that there is a greater difference within family cultures than across cultures.
Hmm.
Because, like if I grew up in a deeply authoritarian family, right? And
Mhm.
I meet a culture like that is super permissive, like from my culture, from a different culture, like I think the authoritarian family system is going to have more in common with each other, depending on like whatever country you're from, than than the fact that like, oh, you're Afghani and I'm Brazilian. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
that's
that is my bias. I have no research to prove this. I have never written about it, but this is my bias. But so because I come from that approach, you know, um, when I started working in South Africa, I was very unsure, like how, like I have, I have Latina, like I have like a lot of connection to the Latino world. I have, US, but it was my first time living in an African nation. And I was like, how am I going to approach like the huge divide of the difference of how they're living their lives in this country at this time, because I was living in South Africa 2003 to 2005. And what I saw, Sumaya, was like, oh, this is so interesting. The way they explain their trauma symptoms is different, right? Like they were like, oh yeah, I have a snake in my stomach, like, right, because of all the distress and the gastrointestinal distress, right? Because of where I,
yeah.
um, or like I have, like I have, like gazelles running in my chest, whatever it was. Like, so the way they would explain their sensations, like, made a lot of sense to them. And like, I was like, oh yeah, I get that. Right. But like the trauma symptoms in and of themselves, to me, they did not show up that different. Right. They still felt
Mhm.
like alienated from their families, or they felt really angry. Like a lot of what like they needed support with was pretty similar, even
Yeah.
though the lifestyle or the background may have had elements that I didn't, like I couldn't relate to, like how they were showing up in their life. Like, these are, we're human beings, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I approach it like, you have a lot to teach me about your life, right? About your experience, about your relationship to your body. You have a lot to teach me, right? Like, and
Mhm.
I am available to support you in that, right? And I want to support you in that. So
Yeah.
that's how I approach it. And um, did you ask me like what the challenge is? I don't know. I think if we approach each other from that place of like, we are humans together on this, on this planet, I think
Yeah.
a lot of times that can help come over a lot of the distress, because I present as pretty privileged white woman, right? And
Yeah.
that's not how I feel inside, right?
Of
But that's
course.
like, so I think a lot of the overcoming is the perception.
Yeah. That's true. Like about authority family. Um, I never thought about this way. Why? Like, I just mind blown now. Like, my brain is like, okay, like, there's no like, but in the end, we're all human being, as you said. Like, so
Yeah.
after learning, knowing that the human,
Yeah.
it can solve work.
Right.
Um, so like, you work at both as a therapist and as a trainer with many
Mhm.
different populations.
I have. Yeah.
Um, Looking back, what
Yeah.
has been one of the most impactful or meaningful experience in your work? Like something that shaped you as a psychotherapist?
Um, so many things. Let me tell you about one. Okay. So
Mhm.
can we go to the picture of me in Kenya? It's actually me in Kenya. I think slide 34. So let me tell you about this experience. This experience was a lovely experience because when I was living in Kenya, I was very involved in an organization called the Alternatives to Violence Project. And
Mhm.
it's a volunteer-based project that's all over the world. And it's really addressing like, what are the roots of violence? How do I contribute to violence? And what can I do to change that? What can I do personally in my life to change the transmission of violence and the impact of violence? So this training was with people in Kenya after I'd already left Kenya, because I left Kenya in 2014, and I went back and I contacted the community and I said, I have some funds that I could come in and train and help you with, like, really learning about trauma and treating trauma symptoms, because a lot of the AVP facilitators, because it's a big training to become an AVP, an Alternatives to Violence Process project facilitator, are working in communities where there's so much trauma. Like, they're either working in prisons, or they're working where there was a lot of violence in Kenya or in Uganda. And so I said I would come in and do this training that they could go to for free,
Mhm.
because of a foundation giving me some funds for it. And so we did this 5-day training, and some people who worked like in the police force as counselors, people who work in prisons, people who worked, like in mountain communities, and, like we work on the coast. So like a big portion of Kenya was impacted by this training, where people came, learned what trauma is, how to deal with trauma, how to respond to it as a paraprofessional, right? Not as a professional, because there's not enough therapists in many developing places, right? And because of that what you were talking earlier, Sumaya, like that cultural divide, that barrier, like only crazy people go to therapy, right?
Yeah.
And so like, like putting these techniques and putting these capacities in the hands of people who are already trusted in their communities, who were doing this work through violence. So a lot of people already showing up with trauma, and they showing up with trauma, right? and
Mhm.
and it was a 5-day training, and so therefore, like, that sensation of like, this mattered a huge amount in their personal lives, in their family lives, and in all the communities that they worked, and it spread through Kenya, and it was, that's a very lovely feeling to say, like, oh, this thing that we could, like, they trusted me because I'd lived there, I knew this community. They trusted to say, like, yes, I'll come and do this 5-day training with you. And
Yeah, that was really meaningful for me, a beautiful way to uh, understand this
yeah,
whole situation. And thank you.
thank you.
And as a final thought,
Yeah.
what advice would you like to leave to our audience today, according for the EMDR therapist?
So I would say, don't endure. It's like gonna make me cry. Like, when I think about, having to endure pain or distress or suffering, like, and feeling like I just have to go through life like this. Like, don't endure. Like, there is help, there is help available. There's ways to heal. You know, there's there's a sense that, like through the internet, through online participation, you can access healing, you can access support, you can access transformation, so that you can come to a place of well-being, and health, and a sense of, feeling lighter in the world. So yeah, don't endure suffering. That's my that's my parting shot.
Thank you.
uh,
And thank you so much once again for being with us and share your experience and wisdom so generously. We
oh, thank
truly,
you. Yeah.
I truly appreciate your time and presence.
Oh, I
Thank,
really appreciate you, and I wish you the best in your career. It's just
thank you.
starting.
Yeah, thank you so much. And uh, so to everyone who joined us today, thank you all for joining and for your thoughtful attention. That bring us today's session, end of today's session. And I hope today's conversation offered understanding and sense of direction in your healing journey. Uh, then take care, stay safe, and we hope to see you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much,
Bye.
and have a good day. Bye bye.